Hello everybody, in this video we're going to take a look at the voter registration shifts for November across 8 different states. This data was already available prior to the election, but we're going to see how it compares to the results. So this data is going to be from Michael Prusser on X. He's associated with Decision Desk, and these had the nice visuals. So we're going to start in New Jersey, which might be the biggest shock of this election. We could see in 2020 Biden won the state by about 16 points. This time it's a lot closer to 5.5, but as of the last update, the Democrats had a massive party registration advantage. It was over 900,000. That's 1.6 for the Republicans, 2.5 for the Dems, and another 2.5 to 2.6 for other. But what about the changes since October? Well, Republicans had a big surge here. They gained almost 17,000. Dems were at about 6. Other had the most by far, which was over 44,000. Then down here at the bottom, you can see in November of 2022, the Dems had an advantage of 1,068,000. So the advantage now has sharply gone down. And in November of 2020, it was 1,079,000. So does the party registration data tell us anything? Well, after this election, I think Republicans will say yes, it does, and Democrats are going to say not exactly. If you just go by which party has actually gained, it's certainly the Republicans by 11,000. And there's no way to really downplay that. Yeah, some of those Republicans could be voting for the Democrat, but the bigger thing that stands out is going to be other or independents. They had about twice the amount of both Dems and Republicans combined. Now, it's always going to be unclear who independents are going to vote for, but given that it's a fairly blue state, the safe assumption is that more of those independents would support the Democrats. However, after this last election, we saw the state almost get down to competitive status. So either those Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents decided to stay home, or some of them crossed over and actually voted for Trump. So this could easily be the high point for Trump, and next time it swings easily back to the left. But for now, just based on this, given that it happened right before the election, maybe we should have put a little bit more weight on this than not. Now let's move on to Iowa, and we have to take a look at this state because of that Seltzer poll that came out right before the election that showed Harris up by a few points. That gave Democrats some newfound hope that Harris might sweep. Republicans completely dismissed it, and I was more so on the dismiss side. But the final result, where Trump easily won it by double digits, might be backed up by these registration shifts. Republicans over 11,000, Democrats under 3,000. Other was at about 4,500. Republicans have 143,000 advantage in the state. That's up from 64K a couple of years ago and 22K a couple of years before that. It was always tough for me to believe that Iowa could actually be competitive. I thought if that was the case, then Harris would pretty much sweep every other state easily. No other data was pointing in that direction, even though the Seltzer poll at that point was highly reputable. It was just one piece of data, and it proved to be an extreme outlier. Seltzer's reputation from this point going forward is going to be definitely under intense scrutiny. What about the state that Trump flipped this time that he had not won in 16? That's Nevada. Well, 4 years ago, Biden won it by almost 2.5. This time it looks like Trump might carry it comfortably. The registration shifts are also clearly in the direction of the GOP. They went up over 26,000, and Dems under 17,000, similar with other. The Dems statewide only have a 9,200 vote advantage. It's down from 52K a couple of years ago and 86,000 in the last presidential election. So that is massively on the decline for the Dems, and this state is well positioned to flip in the near future. I thought Trump could win the state. I thought he might come up just short, but I didn't think he'd win it by the relatively comfortable margin that he did. What about a border state, Arizona? Trump also looks like he flipped this rather comfortably, and these voter registration shifts go back from July. Republicans were over 107,000 and Dems at 70, and other was just over 80,000. It's another clear advantage for the Republicans, and statewide they're up almost 300,000, and that's way over 100,000 more than a couple of years ago in the midterms, and in 2020 it was at 130,000. So maybe there's a pattern here where Republican registration shifts have gone up a lot and Trump was able to win the state. It could all be coincidence. There could be other factors. Definitely do not put all your weight on this, but it is something to consider. Now, how about Trump's home state of Florida? That one he won easily by double digits, up from just 3.36 in 2020. That state status as a swing state has pretty much been taken completely off the board. The registration shifts since October might also back that up. Republicans over 123,000, Democrats over 64,000, other is under 98,000. The GOP advantage here is now over 1.1 million. 4 years ago, it was only 306,000, and in 2020, it was actually Dems that had the advantage of over 130,000. So this state has gotten very red in a very short time. Here, the Republicans have a lot of space to work with. They can take a big hit and still easily carry the state. We saw it in 22 in the midterms, and it continued into this presidential election. It looks like that's likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Now let's move on to the most populous state, that's California. The last time Biden won the state by 29 points, it looks like Trump has put a big dent in that this time. The changes from October show the Republicans had the advantage here, over 103,000. Dems at about 76. 106,000. Other was the winner at 106,000. Dems have a colossal advantage here of over 4.7 million. That number was over 5 million a couple of years ago, and that number is also a little bit lower than it was in the last presidential election. So Dems may have reached their peak here in California. Theoretically, if the trends continued in a couple of decades, maybe the state could actually start to become more competitive. It's still overwhelmingly blue, but it's a whole lot less blue than it was in 2020. Now, what about another huge state? We've got New York. Now, this state reports their voter registration data way less often. So since February, Republicans gained 126,000, and Dems 167, other at 207. Dems have an advantage here of 3.1 million, and that is also down from the two previous elections. The last time Biden did carry the state by 23 points. Again, looks like this time Trump put a massive dent in that margin. It's states like California and New York where Trump was able to make huge gains in the popular vote, and it looks like he won it. Again, this state is a long way from being actually competitive, and Democrats actually did win this voter registration shift. So sometimes there's some mixed signals here, but in this situation, it could easily be independents that crossed over and voted for Trump. And the last state we've got here is Colorado. Last time Biden won it by 13.5. It's a small improvement this time for Trump, but the voter registration shifts show the GOP with the slight advantage. They were about 26,000, and Dems at under 25,000. Other had over 49,000. The Dems have an advantage here of 110,000. It's down a bit from 22, where they had 121,000. And it's also up from 2020, where Dems had the advantage of 100,000. This is a state that used to be red, then it was purple. Now for a little while, we're kind of used to it as a blue state. Even though it's still redder than places like California or New York, it doesn't look like the Trump brand has the right kind of appeal with voters in Colorado. Working class voters are where Trump seems to do his best. That's how he was able to make a pretty big gain. But still, Trump gained in pretty much every state across the board. Some of them were by notable margins and not just 1 or 2 points. So these are some shifts we've seen in 8 states. All of them, except for New York, Republicans had more gains. And does that translate into predicting who would win the presidential election? In this case, you could make a case that it does. But because of the independent vote, I don't think there's a ton of predictive value in it. Plus, some states report their data at different times. Some states have automatic voter registration. It's hard to make any concrete predictions. However, one thing that did seem more likely is based on this data, Republicans were going into that election with far more momentum than the Democrats. Independents or Republicans could have still crossed over and voted for Harris, but without knowing who they're going to vote for. Seeing the GOP gain pretty much decisively across these states in registration, that's at least enough to think it's reasonable to lean in that direction toward Trump if you only saw this data and nothing else. I think this time it panned out, but it could easily not pan out other times. So that's it for these 8 states. That should give you a good idea of the registration shifts that led up to this election. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of this data? Do you think it has any real predictive value, or do you think it was just a coincidence? Do you think Republicans leading in far more of this data was a clear indicator for Trump winning the election, or do you just think it was a fluke? What about any states in particular? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.